This week on A to Z Running, we tackle the two biggest opposing approaches to training and discuss which is the better way to train.
In the world of running, the Berlin Marathon was deep, but Chicago Marathon was fast. We'll break them both down for you.
If you throw enough money at it, can you make track a thing in the United States? The inaugural Athlos track meet set out to discover just that.
All this and more on A to Z Running. Welcome back to the revamped version of the A to Z Running podcast, where we help runners thrive with information, inspiration, and coaching services. I'm Andy.
And I'm Zach. And remember, to find out about our services and everything else we do here, you can go to AtoZrunning.com, look for the word coaching, and follow us on Instagram and Spotify and YouTube, where we post content.
Well, I have an interesting story to tell you. I was in Prague in the Czech Republic, and I was running, and a group of runners invited me to do hill repeats with them. And the conversation began when I first ran by them and they were doing running drills. And so, of course, I commented, because you very rarely see adult runners doing running drills together on the trail. And I said, hey, awesome job doing your running drills. You're going to be faster for it. And then on the way back, they invited me to do their hill repeats. Stair repeats, excuse me.
Stair repeats.
Yeah. I only did a few of them because I had already been running for a while, but it was very nice of them. Shout out. A few of them might be listening because they followed our podcast. So it was just great. It was wonderful to have that warmth and familiarity with other runners.
So in other words, what you're saying is that runners are great people.
Yes.
Everywhere in the world.
I have to say that by far, runners were the most friendly people in the Czech Republic. For sure.
Possible that
others,
that is true everywhere in the world.
Maybe. But I'd be running down the street, I'd see another runner, and they'd give me a little wave. And other times when I'm walking down the street, people didn't make eye contact. So it was a very drastic difference between the friendliness of the runners versus just everyone else on the street.
So the real question is, does that same person, that runner, wave at you in a friendly way when they are not running?
I think there's a camaraderie
only while running.
Yeah, there's like a camaraderie with runners,
yes.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of how it goes. We've talked about the research here and how the running thing, we like to do that around other people doing the running thing, whether or not we interact with each other or just like to be kind of in the same place at the same time, doing the struggling in the world together, as it were. But I challenge everyone to consider, is it running that makes the person nice, or is it the nice person who just happens to always choose to be a runner? I don't know.
Interesting thought.
I don't know. But as we go, we've got lots of interesting things to talk about. I did want to just briefly mention, because we've talked so much about the work of Steve Magness, and he had a recent article that was really fascinating, and it essentially was clickbait that caught me. And you got me, Magnus, because the title was, or the subject line was, the best workout for endurance and health. And I was like, okay, all right, what are you going to say? What are you going to say, Magnus? And sure enough, he baited me, because the answer is there isn't one. Of course there isn't one. There's no such thing as a best workout for anything. But rather the whole idea of this, like the best workout, the perfect plan, all that kind of stuff. He basically is like that. We need to stop chasing after those things, because they're just farcical and nonsensical most of the time. And it has everything to do with my current context and what I need and what should be done for me in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And it's more about, like, if you're thinking about it that way, it's more about what you're doing rather than what you're getting from it. And so it's just backwards thinking, because you want to be thinking about, like, what do I want to achieve by doing this workout? What adaptations do I want to make? How do I want to progress? Rather than I want to nail this perfect workout.
Yeah. All right. So first up, let's talk about some updates from A to Z Running. Those of you who are ongoing existing listeners to the podcast now are experiencing the first. Well, no, because things like, if you're watching, you've noticed some of the graphics are different. And if you're Well, you are listening either way. And you notice the music's different. So there are a few slight changes because this is the start of the 6th year of the A to Z Running podcast.
6 years.
That's true. 6 years.
Ooh-wee.
And we can count on one hand the number of weeks we have not posted an episode in
true.
5 years' time.
Now 6 years.
Well, no, we're starting the 6th year.
Oh, gotcha.
All right, so that's exciting. But here's the next change to the A to Z Running podcast. By popular demand, and I do say it that way because we have resisted this for years now, but you all have asked us to share a little bit more about the things that we are doing as a kind of personal touch to what we're doing and putting these ideas into practice and other types of things. And so we're going to do a bit of that. We've got the people we coach, and we've got the running that we do ourselves, and running or other things that we are doing in the sport. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that. Not every single week, but we'll share when there are things to share.
We'll do it after we do the A to Z Running shout-outs, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
first, the people we coach, the people we're supporting, we always love to tell you what's going on there and the amazing work that everybody's doing. So we're going to start with that, certainly.
Park to park, we had a double A to Z Running win. Justin was first overall with a PR, and Allie was first overall.
This is a half marathon.
And Dan was first in age group. So great showing.
Top end finishes all around. So every A to Z Running runner who ran it won some aspect of it. That doesn't normally happen, just so you're aware. But if you are coached by A to Z Running, chances are you're going to do that more than if you...
No promises.
No promises. Hey, it's exciting times. The Jackson Hole Marathon, Craig ran on his spree of trying to run a marathon in every of the 50 United States.
I can't wait to hear about that one. That's going to be interesting. I love Jackson Hole, so I'm sure it was gorgeous.
It was mountainous.
Mountainous. And then the She Runs half marathon, Sarah was second in age group with another fast half marathon time. Lorenda ran the race as well and ran a PR, and Marjorie ran it too.
Rock on.
Rock on.
At the Midwest Everest Trail 20K, Elijah, in his debut trail race, won the race, took first overall, and Spencer, also his debut at that distance, finished just outside the podium himself. And so very nicely done. The two of them kind of last minute decided, let's go do this race together, and they did very well. It was very fun. And then in the Twin Cities events, Lance did the triple.
Everything.
Actually, the
All
5K, 10K. No, because I think there's a half also.
Oh, okay.
He did the 5K and 10K one day, and then came back the next morning and ran a marathon. Just because why not? You can do things like
Because
that.
runners
So
like
you
to
do
have
it.
fun by suffering.
True that.
Chicago Marathon was big for us. We had Alyssa running her debut, Jessica, Jonah a PR. We had Laura's. We had two of them, Laura M and Laura S. And we had Marjorie.
And at the Newport Half Marathon, Maria ran as well. So lots of fun stuff there. Now, how about us, Andy? You ran in Prague. You had a good time.
I was able to begin more running and great timing to explore on foot, which is my favorite way to explore a city because you actually can take it all in, the sights, the sounds, and it was fantastic. It was wonderful. My cousin, Justin, who's not a runner, made me the best routes. I was so impressed with him. He sent them to me each night,
Wow.
and I ran them, and it was
This is the
so
first time
fun.
hearing about this.
Oh, yeah. It was awesome. So Justin came up with all my routes, and I got to see things along the way. So it was great sightseeing plus great running.
Props to Justin.
Good job, Justin.
This is where the local access really makes a difference. Second question: did you go on Strava's heat map and check
No,
where people are?
I didn't, but I didn't see runners for two of my runs, but one of them there were quite a few runners. There was a longer stretch of trail that could be uninterrupted. And I'm not looking to be running any long workouts or anything, so it didn't matter to me to be interrupted as long as I was seeing beautiful things. So, but this one run was a great spot. So like if you were going to come next time with the boys too, you
Why?
should do a run on the long stretch.
Did you say next time?
Yeah, we should go. We
Nope.
should go as a family. be fun.
That's really far away.
But another thing I want to add about how I'm doing, I have been getting great treatment at endurance rehabilitation and athletics. Stephanie's been seeing me, and she's been doing dry needling and doing some scraping and working with me on some long, extended back issues I've had for a very long time. She's helping resolve them and getting my kinetic chain with my back and my core and my hip girdle to all be functioning right.
So there's a lesson here. What are the things that we need to do when we're not super healthy to help us get super healthy? And just always glad for the physios that are doing the good work.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we do recommend doing scraping. This is just a little offshoot of this.
Scraping is
Graston, gua
sha, but it's the same.
It's all the same things. It's all scraping of the fascia and of the scar tissue that we may have. And I have always kind of done that on and off, but Stephanie was doing it at endurance, and then I was like, I should be getting back into this. So I have found extreme benefit from scraping my hamstring, which was my injured area, before running. And I do have the code again. I asked for the code again from ProTech Athletics, and they have a more flexible scraper, and I like it a lot, so I recommend it. Not just saying it because they gave us a discount code, but it's if you go to ProTech and you want to get this scraper, you can get 20% off with the code ATOZ20. So it's ATOZ20. 20.
20. The number 20.
Yeah, the number 20.
So there you go. Now we've turned it into a promo.
I didn't mean to. Well, I just thought I'd mention it because as I think about how I'm doing, I do think that the routine of scraping before running has been hugely beneficial because many of you know this, but you should not overstretch a hamstring. And I was doing that in the early stages, not knowing exactly what the injury was, but it was prolonging my issues by overstretching my hamstring. But to get some relief for the tightness and allowing the muscle to glide better, scraping is awesome for that because you're loosening everything up so that your muscle can elongate the way that it's meant to.
Okay. Well, enough about us. Now let's talk about the big ideas in training and the best way to do it. We here at AtoZrunning particularly subscribe to a kind of training approach that is, one, both very common, but also, two, that is driven predominantly by the foundations that Arthur Lydiard set when he was exploring training principles as early as the 1940s and 50s. And so what this amounts to is, in essence, the big kind of umbrella here is the concept of periodization, and in particular that you build certain building blocks in order to more effectively build other building blocks, and you work toward a fundamental ultimate goal and a focus for a season. And so this has long been understood as kind of the general key approach. Now, the implementation of it is not always exactly the same, and a lot of different kind of offshoots have spun up over the years. But one particular offshoot that we want to respond to here for a bit and talk about the differences and kind of where these things come from is what is called, at least by Dr. Jason Karp, if not in general in the running universe, is called reverse linear periodization. So linear periodization is kind of the Lydiard fundamental. We'll explain that. And then reverse linear periodization is literally what it sounds like.
Opposite.
You're doing essentially the opposite. And so what the case is here, and this particularly comes from Karp's book, The Endurance of Speed. You know, just loving the book titles there, using the words with each other. The Endurance of Speed is a quick read about a way to use reverse linear periodization as you train for longer races, in particular marathons, half marathons, and such.
I think what probably grabbed Zach's attention is the subtitle that says "The Revolutionary New Way to Train for Marathons and Half Marathons."
Anytime someone claims that I have figured out a new way to do a thing in running, I'm skeptical.
But he also needs to read it.
Want to find out what they're claiming?
What they're going to say. But of course, there's nothing new under the sun.
And Karp's method actually is not new at all, because he was fundamentally getting it from a practice that, when he explains it in his own book, really comes from Renato Canova, who is the Italian coach of most of the most successful Kenyan runners in the last 30 years. And Renato's been doing this for a long time. So Karp specifically mentions that in his book. So the title may be some form of clickbait, I guess you could say. But in principle, I also have an interest in trying to find out what are the different things that people claim to be the best ways to do this thing. How do they differ? And what is always most interesting to me is how are they actually a lot more similar than they claim to be. So a lot of times you get something like this kind of a book that says this is this new thing, and then you read into it and you think this actually is not altogether that different from what you're claiming to be the old thing. But it's easier to sell a book if you claim to have something new. And so maybe that's part of why authors tend to do that and coaches tend to frame it that way, which is one of the reasons why I particularly, when we talk with athletes about what we do in training, continue to emphasize that these are not our ideas and none of it is new. We didn't come up with something revolutionary, contrary to the claims of other people. We're not trying to claim something revolutionary. Really, what we're trying to do is figure out how to do the things that have been tried and proven best, how to do them in the best possible way.
For the specific person.
For each runner.
Yeah.
And so, as it were, when we talk about this comparison here, understand that there's a kind of philosophical dynamic, the overall approach, and then there's a question about what individual implementation looks like. And you're going to get a sense pretty quickly that these ideas are not altogether that different. And so, let's talk about them. Linear periodization, in a nutshell, is Lydiardism. It's the way that Lydiard originally was training his first and most successful athletes. And so what that is it's periodization, starting with the easy, long stuff and working your way toward the shorter, more intense stuff over time. And so they would do things like a building block of conditioning work that is very generic, that is a lot of volume. Most of the volume is a little bit easier effort and not as much intensity going on. And then after a time, they would introduce more intensity, scale back some of the volume, although that's a misnomer because most of the time in Lydiard's runners weren't really doing scaling back volume at all, actually, at any point until their final couple of weeks of training. But the volume emphasis changes. We'll say it that way. And so you add more intensity as you progress. That's essentially it. Linear periodization is the idea of building the aerobic system first and then stacking the anaerobic system on top of that with some other things going on. And that's the first key area that the opposition argument is going to address. And we'll share that here in a moment. What Lydiard was essentially trying to achieve by this approach in the earliest days when he was trying to get his athletes through this successfully is you need to build up certain things to more successfully build other things later. And Dr. Keith Livingstone wrote extensively about more of the science behind what Lydiard was doing. Anyone who wants to try to frame Lydiard in any sense needs to also read Livingstone because he provides a little bit more clarification around the intent behind a lot of these things. And so one of the things Livingstone specifically articulates is that the question isn't whether or not you can build aerobic and anaerobic systems at certain times, but the question is what's the most efficient way to build overall fitness? And they found that a greater emphasis on aerobic work until the final stages of the training is more efficient than anaerobic work. And anaerobic work in particular allows for, or rather only ever exists as a kind of percent of your aerobic capacity. And that's fundamentally true. So what we mean by that is when your aerobic ceiling is so high, your anaerobic capacity then exists relative to that ceiling. And so that means that higher your aerobic capacity, the higher your anaerobic capacity. We also might just frame this as like VO2 max, right? Fundamentally, your higher VO2 max means a higher potential anaerobic yield. Now, there's a lot of nuances with that where like individuals have some differences. So you'll see something like Acclaim world-class athletes. And some of them have a VO2 max in the low to mid 80s, and others have a VO2 max in the low to mid 70s, and yet they're competing at a similar level. How is that possible? It refutes the whole thing, and it's like, no, that the exception to the rule does not refute the rule. It's just that it's a kind of exception, and that's going to always be true because human physiology seems to be a very, very complex thing, and we can't distill it down to simple principles that are applied equally to all individuals.
Was there also a claim in Lydiard methods that anaerobic can be an interruption at because there's a cost to the time where you could be building your aerobic
We'll come back to
condition?
that.
Okay.
We will, because that's one of the things that I think Karp misunderstood about Lydiard based on Livingstone's writing. But yes, there are some concerns and questions. We're going to come back to all of them. Okay, so let's talk about reverse linear periodizations. What do they do differently? And this, again, is written about extensively in Karp's book, and he spent some time with Renata Canova and the Kenyans in particular at the training camp that Canova was at the time. I don't know exactly what year this was, but we're talking like early to mid-2000s. And so Canova was expressing when Karp sat down with him and just asked, like, what's your training approach? And he was essentially saying, we'd spend more time with speed earlier on, faster stuff, and build up the volumes and work on the volumes over the course of the season and build on top of the speed work as we go. Now, I happen to also know from other writings about Canova that expression is a grossly oversimplification of what they do. There's a lot more complexity involved there. And the best way to describe what you'll find as you read about Renato's training approaches is that he is a very savvy coach. And he does not do the same things for the same people all the time. He does not have a cookie cutter thing that he just says, this is what all my runners are going to do. And so what you'll see is like the Kipchoges of the world did not train the same as the Sifan Hassans of the world, did not train the same as you start applying all these things. And it's like, there's a lot going on there. And I'm not suggesting that Kipchoge and Sifan Hassan have the same coach, but that's just to illustrate the point. So there's a lot of interest around what exactly these coaches are doing and when it works better and worse. But the principle here that Karp is breaking down is then this idea of you build up the speed stuff to create a foundation that's more of like a neuromuscular, highly active state. And then when you start adding in more volumes, that the volumes are more effective because you have this greater neuromuscular and physiological capacity. And that's an interesting point. And it's one we have to dwell on at some point or another here as we're breaking these things down because, of course, it would be true. If you are more efficient, for instance, as a runner, if you are more proprioceptively have greater control, then, yeah, you're going to be able to get more out of each step you take as a runner. And so we want to be mindful of that. We happen to feel that the way to address it is a little bit differently than what he's doing here. And so we're going to talk about that too. So one particular note I should mention, he's especially talking about runners who do not already have a history or foundation of competitive running. So if you're like coming off of a high school cross-country or track kind of thing, or college even cross-country and track, where you've spent years racing, competing, and training more aggressively, then you already have some of that foundation. And so in his claims, the Lydiard approach, strictly speaking, would be more effective for you than a runner such as an adult runner who's getting into running for the first time in life and does not have that kind of a foundation.
That seems backwards to me a little bit, because I feel like those that have not been running, they're at a higher risk of injury going in doing speed without having the musculoskeletal resilience first.
Yeah, right. So, yes, I agree. I happen to agree wholeheartedly, but I think that is a difficult claim on Karp's part to apply to a training approach, because he's suggesting that years of something that you have done behind you mean that you should train this season in a different way. But there's so many other factors that contribute to that. What if that runner is coming off of like 6 months of just sitting on a couch all the time? Are you telling me that all those years of aggressive training are somehow still providing a substantial amount of benefit when they start the season up?
Oh, I hope so. I've been injured for so long. I hope that there's some benefit I can have.
Stop. You just do that, and that's a terrible thing. Stop. Okay, so the point here is we don't fully agree with Karp, and we want to talk about why we feel like these principles are not that far apart, but there are certain key things that I think make this a lot more of a comprehensive approach than make the Lydiard approach at least a lot more comprehensive. So two primary claims that we wanted to address from Karp. The one is that Lydiard was wrong. The anaerobic training does not harm aerobic capacity because Lydiard had stated in the past that anaerobic training harms your good aerobic condition. His exact words. Karp references a number of studies that don't seem to demonstrate that. But the claim Lydiard is making is also not just the sense of like the anaerobic training causes something negatively to the aerobic training, but that by taking out an aerobic exercise and replacing it with an anaerobic one, that you are doing something less effective for the aerobic side. Therefore, the net result is a reduction in your aerobic potential from what it would have been.
Yeah.
So I cannot say, I'm not in Lydiard's mind, I can't say that that's exactly what he intended when he said those words, but when Livingstone dissects it a bit further in his work about Lydiard's approach, he specifies some of this a little bit more clearly. But more to the point, it's a question of efficiency and effectiveness. It's not a question of whether or not a thing is possible. It is very much true that anaerobic training is also a kind of aerobic stimulus. It's going to help you aerobically as well, but not as much as a purely aerobic stimulus would.
And we were talking earlier, I had mentioned the part about cost. So there could be higher recovery needs, and you're probably not going to get as high a volume in for that day. So it's just lesser of a stimulus for your aerobic system, which is the priority for distance running.
Similarly, the recovery factor needed for an aggressive anaerobic, and I don't mean aggressive by like individual repetition intensity, but like the overall body of work that an anaerobic workout is compared to an aerobic one, tends to desire a little bit more recovery time. And any amount of time you spent recovering that is not itself a quality aerobic adaptation, or stimulus, I should say, is less aerobic adaptation. And so the net result of more time spent in anaerobic work is less aerobic development. And that's the key first takeaway. So the question now becomes, if you do this in the early stages of training and spend more time doing something like anaerobic development, which, by the way, as I'm talking with other coaches out there, there's a lot of question marks around, like the idea of true anaerobic training probably isn't even what a lot of these coaches are doing.
Right.
Like they think it's anaerobic because they're doing something like intervals.
But not intervals typically are not anaerobic.
Right. Like think about the Norwegian method for a moment and Ingebrigtsen's double threshold workouts, right? So he's doing things like these 400 meter and 1,000 meter repeats. They are aerobic. They are literally aerobic. Like they're lactate threshold repeats. He's deliberately not elevating his blood pH levels to a certain point, which is by very definition what an anaerobic workout is it's inducing a kind of acidosis because you're exercising beyond aerobic potential, which means your body is breaking down things differently. It's not using oxygen to break down the fuel stores. And one of the byproducts of breaking down fuel stores without using oxygen is a kind of acid response, which happens because of ions in the bloodstream and so on and so forth. So I don't have the science in front of me right now, so I'm probably explaining that poorly. But the general understanding is clear, what I've just articulated. So now what we're saying then is if you don't exercise the right way with your intensity, just because you're doing intervals, just because you're doing repeats, or just because you're doing something of higher intensity does not mean it's anaerobic. And so this raises a lot of questions because I read through some of Karp's recommendations about the exact training and some of the things they're doing. And in implementation, most people who do the things that he recommends here for his anaerobic stuff, most people are not going to actually be doing anaerobic work here, just by the nature of not implementing it in a way that would actually be anaerobic. So that's not to say you can't, but it's not quite as straightforward. So that's one of those claims. Now, the next one, the main second claim we wanted to respond to, is the idea that the aerobic and anaerobic systems do not need to be developed in sequence. And so you can do them in any order you want, and it's just as effective. Now, Karp particularly cites research in the area. Well, actually, you can't prove a negative, and he tries to here, where he's basically saying that the research doesn't show that because they haven't done research in a way to show it, and so it isn't there. But either way, the lack of body of research is to suggest that it doesn't seem to make a difference whether you do aerobic or anaerobic work first, or you go back and forth or something. And yet, in his own words, he specifically references when they have tried to study this, the thing they've looked at is muscular strength, which, quoting now, found that linear periodization is more effective than reverse linear periodization on the development of muscular strength. We have many times tried to determine in the running universe what kinds of things, when you're building a sequence, what kinds of things you need to build when. And one of the major considerations is that the better your muscular strength, the more resilient your body is to the training stimuli. And so that as I grow things like muscular strength first, I am more likely to stay healthy doing the other things because it's not as great a trauma on my body, or my body doesn't break down quite as severely when it is a major stimulus. And so there's a question around that. And we have at length tried to determine what that looks like. And there's lots of ways to do it. As you know, most things in training, there's lots of ways to do it. But the recommendation becomes spend time running easy and long first, because that's building up your musculoskeletal system, your general strength, so that when you start adding in greater levels of intensity, your body is more capable of handling it.
Which is the point of periodization in the early stages. Yeah. Linear periodization, doing that building phase. That's why we're doing it. It sets the stage. It's like you're tilling a larger area for a larger garden to be able to yield more fruit at the end of your season. If you have a small little garden, because you go quick through that, you're only going to yield so much. So putting in that early work sets the stage.
Yeah. And that speaks to the kind of the overall sense here. And so when we reflect on what Karp is articulating as the benefits of reverse linear periodization, what we've found as we've researched the concept more broadly is that the claims are all predominantly focused on what kind of running workout you do. But if that is the only thing you're thinking about, then you're missing too many layers. And so, for instance, we talked about what about if you're a newer runner? What if you've run competitively for years before this? Should you do things differently? And of course, the answer is yeah, probably. But more to the point, if you're newer to running, the thing you lack the most outside of things like energy system adaptations and such is your body doesn't know how to do the running thing at a high level yet, like neuromuscular command and proprioceptive awareness. And so that being the case, you do want to do things as early as possible to help develop some of those things. We just happen to be of the mind that it is far less effective to do those things in terms of running workouts than it is to do them in isolated, like precision work, exercises, drills, strength and mobility. And so let's talk about the big picture here for a second. And if we were to say linear periodization is a more effective way to train, it also does not mean that the principles articulated in other approaches are incorrect or ineffective, but rather the way we're implementing them might be different. And so here's the perspective. I mentioned at the beginning we were going to talk about the best way to train. And so here it is. Every runner should be doing these things to some degree every season. It's a question of how much and for how long, depending on what you already have, where you're coming from. And so those things include, foremost, at the early outset stages, you need to be reminding your body how to move in the efficient ways, how to move in the effective ways to be able to run well. And so that, we would say, happens before you take any step running. And that's the drills, the exercises, the mobility, the strength type of stuff. We feel that between seasons, it is always a great idea to reinforce some of those basic things. Even if you do it great day to day in general, it's a good idea to reinforce. And so we do some of that kind of work before we even start running, because that's going to help then reinforce. And by the way, when we say precision work, we're not just talking about like gentle activation exercises or something. Some of this includes like plyometric dynamics. Some of it includes some more kind of explosive types of things.
Skipping as high as you can. Skipping as far as you can.
Jumps, hops, bounces, a lot of the stuff. And so then you look at that and you say, okay, those are the kinds of things when you talk about running like fast speed development, those things fundamentally are more effective at developing your capacity for speed than running an interval workout, for instance.
Well, and I think it's important to identify too that a lot of times when people are doing that faster running, when they haven't wired their body correctly, they're running fast without running correctly, and they end up getting hurt. And so we like the idea of wiring safely prior to running an all-out sprint.
True that. So that's the step that we would say is like step number one. It also happens to be a kind of blend of what Karp is talking about as doing step number one and his stuff. But we don't think you should be doing that in terms of running workouts. Do it in the stuff you do outside of the run. At the same time, or soon after that, you can start building up running volume. But once again, we feel it is much more effective based on certainly what we have encountered in the literature. It is much more effective to start with easy running while you're doing all of this extra proprioceptive and strength work. You're teaching your body to move. Your high levels of muscle recruitment are still active. But in the run itself, you're just keeping it nice and easy. You're going as long as you can, as quickly as you can. Not pace-wise, but you're building up the volume as quickly as you safely can. Because you don't tend to need to build up very gradually when you're doing it at such a low level of exertion. And so, once again, depends on the individual runner, what you're coming off of. But for most runners, unless there's a major disruption, then you can build up the volume pretty quickly. It might only take 2 or 3 weeks to just start a little bit easier and then build up more. But you don't do anything aggressive in terms of training, because at this point in time, all you're trying to do is just get some of the structural resilience, which tends to take about 2 to 4 weeks in any kind of strength building. So give it the time, 2 to 4 weeks, and then you'll be ready.
This might be a good time to interject with a tip about strides. So strides can be appropriate for runners who are wanting to add a little bit of neuromuscularity, but it's not a workout. We suggest to do your strides within an easy run and spread them out Give them like 5 minutes in between each one. And the reason we don't do strides all at the end of a run is because you're able to gain the benefits of better form throughout your run, running mechanics better through your run by spacing them out. So that's just a little tip about doing strides, which you can do in the early phases if you're wired correctly.
Yeah, we don't particularly feel the need to do them during these 2 to 4 weeks I'm describing right now because there's plenty of time for that. We're assuming that you're not on like a time crunch for a season, because if you are, then things have to be done differently anyway. But the point with something like that is there's time to do those things in the right place at the right time, and there's just no urgency to do that right away out of the gate. It's not going to make that much of a difference for you.
Except it can be helpful for form. It really can. Like if someone is having a hard time.
So that's why we do the proproprioceptive work.
But it does put some pieces together. I don't know. I
so
found strides to be helpful.
Right. If that's the point of the timing. If you need to spend more than 2 or 3 weeks doing the build-up stuff, then we're going to advise that you start injecting some other types of fartlicking of short and quick things. That's what Andy means when she's saying strides. And so that will look very differently for each individual athlete in implementation. But the principle here is there's going to be something more than just easy running every day, all day for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, because it's going to be helpful for the greater levels of stimulus. But we're not too worried about it yet, because when it comes down to it, you're going to have plenty of time to do the things you need to do. So the next step would then be the kind of major aerobic building blocks. And it seems to me that most runners just do not understand what Lydiard was trying to do with the conditioning when they describe it, because Lydiard did not have runners just running these long, slow aerobic runs all the time. In principle, most of the running is long, easy running, but there's interjections of some higher levels. He would call it maximum steady state at times. He would also call them half efforts and 3/4 efforts. There's a lot of different ways he described it depending on the era. But then what he would suggest is that, and Keith Livingstone in his book specifically helps us understand the concept of what was happening here, at least once a week, runners were doing highly intense fartlek workouts, like very fast repetitions. The main difference between a fartlek workout as Lydiard was implementing them and something like an anaerobic interval workout is that they just had more rest. They had as much rest as they wanted, actually. And it wasn't measured. Who cares how long you take in between your intervals? You just need to do this throughout the run. And Lydiard actually would specifically tell his athletes, like, go run like in a park somewhere where it's not defined distances, it's not a defined route. Run, jump over the logs, dodge the trees, and go chase a rabbit, and like just do something that's just offbeat and unpredictable. Because the point is layers of neuromuscular stimulus. The point is you're getting some of these high activation running movements, exercises. Like Andy said, you're putting some of the things together so that you're running well, and you're doing it across multiple different types of efforts. And so if you think about it in terms of that concept as a regular, like once or more sometimes, but at least once a week, then all the things that people say about how like you're not running fast until later on in the schedule, you realize that's actually not true at all. You're just not doing a lot of it yet. And so,
or just maybe not in the way that many people think of it. If the people are thinking like repeats on a track, and they're thinking about that as a scenario where you're going to be working harder, but fartleks are hard work.
Yeah. So you get the point. And that's where when you break it down, this concept of linear periodization is not literally strictly linear. There's a ton of crossovers. You're doing some shorter and faster stuff earlier than people seem to sometimes portray. And you're doing the building blocks in such a way to try to achieve the most efficient, the most effective concept in training, to try to implement and achieve adaptations. And so as we do those types of things, then there's often a question of if certain things aren't happening for a runner, then there's a change needed. And so the game plan, as expressed, doesn't always happen exactly that way in implementation because a runner may not be responding as desired to it. And so that's where, again, you get back to like first principles. What are the basic understandings of training, and how do we achieve that at the best possible level? And what does it look like then when I'm actually doing it myself in practice? Lots going on there. Hopefully it made sense. Hopefully it was valuable to you to get a sense for what it means when training approaches talk about their kind of philosophy. Those are the things you're going to see and hear a lot about. I think we've done it. We've addressed the topic thoroughly enough. You can expect on the AtoZrunning podcast a fair bit of talk about what it looks like to train and the right ways and the best ways and what kinds of things are in the running literature. And we like to bring as much of that to you as we can, as often as we can. So expect more of that here in the 6th year of AtoZrunning as well.
And now let's get on to the world of running. We're keeping that segment.
Well, it has been some time since we've shared what's been going on in the world of running. So we have to at least include a few things from the last few weeks, depending on when you're listening to this, including, but starting with the most, what's the right phrase here?
Recent.
Most dynamic, the most recent, the most explosive, the Chicago Marathon. In particular, Ruth Chepngetich. So we teased at the outset that the Chicago Marathon was fast. Last year, the men's Chicago Marathon saw a new world record, which is still the world record held by the late Kelvin Kiptum. And this year, not to be outdone, Ruth Chepngetich broke the women's world record, which was set only last year at Berlin. She broke it by a lot.
Yeah,
and
like
she won the
3 minutes.
race by a whole lot. And we believe in being honest on the podcast here. I do not believe it's legitimate. I don't. And that may or may not ever be proven true or false. But I think there's enough information in front of us to suggest that this is unlikely to be a legitimate performance. So what we want to do here is not try to be overly critical, but tell you what happened and what kind of is surrounding it at the moment. And you can decide for yourself now that I have given you my bias.
That is a bias. I was surprised you just came out and said it.
Came out and said it.
That's it.
Yep.
I mean, for me, I still have some amount of hope that it could be true, but at the same token, I think that it's good for all of us to be a little skeptical. I think it's healthy with the climate of how much cheating has been going on to have some amount of skepticism and our eyes open to things. So the world record by Ruth Chepngetich was a 2-minute world record for a time of 2:09:56. It's
a 2-minute world record, but Tigges Stefa's world record from last year was also 2 minutes faster than the next best. So
maybe even 3.
This is actually about 4 minutes. No, 2. This is about 4 minutes faster than the 3rd fastest ever marathon by a woman. Also happens to be over a 4-minute PR for Ruth Chepngetich. As a matter of fact, a year and a half ago, Chepngetich had, well, no, because she ran that time in Chicago last year. Well, anyway, Ruth Chepngetich had previously the 4th fastest marathon time at one moment in time there, and ran a 4-minute personal best to beat the previous world record by 2 minutes. Couple of things about it, about the race itself. First, she came through the half marathon in 1:04:16, which, if that sounds fast to you, it should, because that is the 5th fastest half marathon time ever posted by a woman. Strike number 1 in Zach's mind. And then, secondly, she ran her first 10K in 30:14, which is only a handful of seconds slower than, or is it faster? Slower than the U.S. 10,000 meter track record. So this is literally almost faster than an American has ever even run the distance of 10,000 meters, and she did it and then continued to finish a full marathon afterward. So, wow, that's something. That's something very fast. She was leading at the halfway point by only about 14 seconds, and then went on to win the race by 7 minutes and 40 seconds. Which, again, should be revelatory to people. She was so much better than everyone else on the day. And then you layer into that the two other considerations that are just major warning signs. First of all, Chepngetich is no stranger to world-class performances. She's run 2:14. She's run 2:15. She's got a lot of great performances. And this is over 4 minutes better than her next best, which was already substantially better than her previous best outside of that. So, like, there's so many questions around how incredible this was. And then the final kind of major concern is that Kenya is really dealing with some troublesome integrity as a nation right now in the sport. It is quickly becoming the most consistent violator of doping violations and bans in the world presently. And at this exact moment in time, Kenya is on the verge of being banned as a country from international competition because of their degree of corruption and cheating going on. So, and that's not speculation. That's been reported by World Athletics. Now, all of that says major suspicions. And of course, we don't know. Chepngetich herself could be just exactly what she seems to be. And that very well may be the case. Let's Run did a good job of mentioning that there are other things here that raise some concerns. She has an agent who has worked with a number of other world-class marathoners who have been busted for doping. Multiple-time world marathon majors winners and Olympic medalists and such. And so she has some associations that are already suspect as well, and that's a concern too. Now, all that aside, all we have at the moment is the performance, and
which is incredible. Even if
incredible,
honestly, even if she's doped, it's still an incredible performance. It's just wild to me for her to be able to run that fast. I think it's incredible to run under 5 minute pace for a marathon as a woman. So I hope that there can be some definitive answers on that. I don't know if there ever can be, because most of these things, it has to be the exact perfect moment that the person gets tested. And when they're training and not competing is when often it's being used to enhance the training and the adaptation. So we might never know, but I do think it's still something to be in awe of. It's really fast. Susanna Sullivan was first for the USA, a full-time math teacher. And that's another thing that's really impressive to me, is that Susanna Sullivan can have this full-time teaching job and then run a 2:21:56.
Not to suggest that professional runners don't have a full life.
They do. Yeah, they do.
But they have a whole lot less going on than full-time teacher who also is a marathoner. Speaking from experience to some degree on that. But we have to include that, because not only is Susanna Sullivan just doing some incredible things, but she beat all the professional runners and is herself not technically a full-time professional runner, because she is not. So that was really strong effort right there. And then John Career on the men's side won the race with a very impressive 2:02:44. A good, strong personal best for him, a minute and change. And also just adds to the family legacy, as his older brother Wesley Career, also a marathon majors winner. And this time now for John Career is the number 6 all-time marathon performance in the world. So putting him close to the likes of Kenenisa Bekele, Eliud Kipchoge, and those folks. Mm-hmm. He's about a minute behind the times that those guys were running. Really cool stuff. Okay. And then for the men's Americans, first American to cross the line was C.J. Albertson, notable because he ran 2:08:17, which is the number 9 all-time U.S. performance. So nice work by Albertson, a kind of breakout. He's been talking for a while about feeling like he's on the verge of bigger and better things, and has been running personal best, but they've always kind of been like chipping away. And here he just dropped a chunk. It's like a minute and a half. Actually, it was almost 2 minutes.
And some other Americans to point out that have been on the show. Zach Panning got a PR. Lindsay Flanagan was a second U.S. woman. She also ran a PR. So good things for those athletes too.
Cool stuff. Now, let's mention Berlin because it was a little bit before, but in particular, Berlin Marathon, notable because of serious depth. And I think there's a few different stats here that need to be shared. So Ethiopia's Milkesa Mengesha won the race in 2:03:17. Only won it by 5 seconds.
Ooh, that's tight.
Which is tight. It was about a 2-minute personal best. Not long ago, by the way, he was running like world-class stuff on the track. Moved to the roads, though, is kind of he's younger than most tend to move off the track onto the roads. So here's what happens. He wins the race by 5 seconds, but 4 guys ran under 2:04 and were then within 20 seconds of each other. So second place was Kai Brian Katut of Kenya, 2:03:22. Third place was Ethiopia's Haimanot Aliu, 2:03:31. And then fourth place was Kenya's Stephen Kiprop in 2:03:37. So 20 seconds separating first through fourth in a World Marathon Majors is just astounding. And then, by the way, number 2 Japanese performance from Yohei Keita in 6th place in 2:05:12. Very strong. Only 20 seconds off of the Japanese national record. But what made this historically deep was that 22 men ran under 2:08 in the same race, which was the second deepest race compared only to 2023's Valencia Marathon, where 28 men ran under 2:08. So you got a lot of people running fast in Berlin this year, which is just no surprise. It also was Berlin's, 50th anniversary. So that's special. We'll talk about that. On the women's side, rounding out a double victory for Ethiopia and starting an Ethiopian 1-2-3 sweep of the Berlin Marathon was Tigist Katema. She won in 2:16:42, 2 minutes ahead of second place. And once again, another Ethiopian 800-meter track star who is now a marathoner. It's a really interesting trajectory here with some of these Ethiopian women. If you're great at the 800, you might also be a great world-class marathoner.
Because it's aerobic.
Right? I don't know. So she also holds, by the way, the debut marathon record. Her debut in the marathon was last year in Dubai. She ran 2:16:07.
Which is faster than her win in Berlin.
Yes. Quick note then. I should mention that was Katema's third marathon in 10 months. She ran Dubai, then she ran London, then she ran Berlin, and she won 2 of the three of them, which is always fun. Second place was Mestawat Fakir, and third place was Bosanau Mulati of Ethiopia. So you got the 3-person sweep. All right, some cool Berlin Marathon stats. 50th running of the Berlin Marathon, 54,280 finishers, which is the most of any marathon ever.
Wait, I thought it was the most difficult to get into, which
that may be true.
Might be the case, but that's a lot of people.
They let more in this year than they normally do, probably because of the 50th anniversary. They wanted to get as many people. I don't know. But here's the crazy part. For 50 years now, Berlin has averaged 21,000 finishers a year, which means that they've got over 1 million people who have finished that race.
That's cool.
Actually, last year,
people, though.
Last year they celebrated. Well, okay, so over 1 million finishers, not 1 million people. 1 million finishers, but last year was actually when they hit the 1 million mark. This year they exceeded it by another 54,000, as I noted. And then they also boast that they have the greatest international representation of any race. Over 80% of the countries in the world.
That's a lot.
Have representation in that race that was just run.
I'm impressed by that.
Right? I mean, you got to do the numbers here. That's like 150 countries.
That's cool.
Actually, it's more than that now that I think about it. But that is exceptional. So there you go. Berlin Marathon, really exciting stuff.
The last thing is a track thing.
Did you hear about this, Andy? Do you know what the Athlos meet was?
Is it part of the series? It's not.
No. This
It's
is a
different
brand
one.
new thing.
It's a brand new. Tell me more.
Okay. So a few weeks back in New York City, they held an inaugural event called the Athlos something. I don't know exactly what the name was.
You didn't write it down?
No, because it's just Athlos. That was like the thing that they had all over everything. And so in this particular event, this was an attempt to make track exciting. A few things. First, it was a women's only meet. I don't know why. There's probably some reason. I didn't see that specifically articulated anywhere, so I'm not sure why. It also did not have field events. It was running. That was it. Again, I don't know why. But what they did is they were basically trying to get all the best, right? And so they just put all the money on the table. Here you go. First place in each event was $60,000 cash prize.
That's a lot of money.
In each event, first place. $25,000 for second place. And then I don't know what third was. Maybe nothing. But one U.S. sprinter, Brittany Brown, actually won $85,000 in this one meet.
Wonderful.
And this is just like
I'm
some
so
random
happy
meet.
to hear that. Good job,
Well,
Brittany Brown, making the money.
Maybe. Let's keep talking about this because
Okay.
maybe this isn't such a great idea. But Faith Kipyegon showed up. She won something, the women's 1500. So she made herself some cash money. Sige Duguma showed up. She won the 800. Got some cash money. By the way, Duguma beat Mary Mora.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, yeah. So Mary Mora was there. She finished second. Kipyegon beat Durebe Welteji of Ethiopia, whom she's been beating, but not by a lot. And Gudaf Sige, by the way, was in the race as well. She finished fourth.
Did she miss the money then?
Well, she certainly missed the big money.
Yeah.
Think about that. The difference between first and second is $35,000.
There's high incentive to win.
You just lost a brand new car by 2 seconds. High incentives. But the other side of this event is they were really trying to go with this like party vibe. So there was like famous rapper performing.
Wow.
They said the name and I was like, that vaguely sounds familiar to me. I think I might know who
You
that
don't
is.
know much about that.
I don't know much about pop culture. They also did like the total VIP treatment. All right. So they only had like 35 total women in the meet.
That's
like
not
I said,
many.
not very many events because they only did a few running events. And not very many people in each event. There was like 6 or 7 in most. And they like rolled out the red carpet. Actually, literally, they had a red carpet entrance thing. They like picked them all up in town cars and stuff and limos and everything. And it's like the black car treatment. They did the like introducing them as they were going into the stadium and fans signing things.
That's
and
cool.
stuff. And they had, like I mentioned, famous rappers, post-race parties, like live music during the thing, crazy stuff. All right, this stadium seats 5,000 people. It's a small stadium. They did not fill the stadium, which tells you everything you need to know.
Well, it might have been about the media that they created from it to promote it in the future. It could have been that it was sponsored by a lot of different companies that wanted to be part of this.
Listen, I happen to know because I looked up some things that this famous rapper that they had and a normal concert has way more than 5,000 people in attendance.
Yeah.
And they
So it was maybe the marketing of it. The event.
even had that person marketed as live performance and they couldn't fill the stadium.
But don't you think that if they would have marketed it more, that they probably would have?
You want to know something really funny?
What?
There was also some professional sports team event, like football, I think, in the same city, not actually far away, because the stadium's pretty close to the football stadium. And do you want to guess who was at the football game and not at the track meet?
No,
Sydney McLaughlin.
Oh, no.
There was a big joke about it. So clearly, here's the thing, all right? They spent more money for this meet than like the entire track season and all of the other meets combined at the U.S. circuit. And nobody cared. And so I can tell you right now, I highly doubt this meet will continue. It might do another 2 or 3 years because maybe there's some contract or something, but this isn't the way to do it. This has never been the way to do it because Americans don't care about track. They don't care to go to track.
But the Europeans do, so how
right, but
can
here's
we
the thing,
get a
Andy.
crowd?
The Europeans care about the sport. They like track. You're never going to get people who don't like track to want to come to a track meet because you've got red carpets and rap music. That's not going to do it. It's never done it in the past. It's never going to do it in the future. You just threw so much money down the toilet. Now, I'm glad you paid all these runners tons and tons of money. But let's be honest.
They deserve it too.
Sure. But also it was highly elitist. They only invited a very small number of people to these races. And so it's like, yeah, you're going to cough up all the money, but you're not actually going to make it a fair opportunity for, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the formula here, and I don't think it's going to work out very well.
We'll see about Michael Johnson's track series.
I like what he's trying to do. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. For the love of the sport. All right. A couple other just quick things here to note. Talk about losing money by a whisker. There was a 5K race in Boulder. New one. It's fairly new in the last few years. Major prize money on the line. 5K for the win. 10K if you break the Colorado State all-comers record. So $15K possible. Well, the woman who won the race, Evelyn Kemboy, missed the 10K all-comers record by 6 seconds. So, missed out on $10,000 by 6 seconds. Bummer. The Hungarian marathon record was busted in Warsaw. Just kind of random note there. Leventi Semere in 2:10:43. That's always fun. And Toyota is not sponsoring the Olympics anymore. And this contract it was a 9-year essentially contract, but ended up being 3 Olympic Games from 2016 through 2024. They were the sponsors. It was an $835 million contract that they have decided not to renew. Don't know why.
Trombone. Because it's not a good return on their investment.
And lastly, we were alluding to this earlier. We mentioned before Kenya is kind of teetering on the edge of a possible national ban from track and field and cross country from running sports on account of their poor
internal
testing integrity testing. And what's crazy about it is this next budget cycle, they just announced that they're cutting the budget for the doping agency by 90%, which tells you one of two things. Either someone's not taking seriously this threat from World Athletics to ban them from competition, or the doping agency is so stinking corrupt that they're trying to kill it and start over and do something different because it's not working out. And the doping agency, by the way, is very, very corrupt there. So we'll see. But we are certainly hopeful that something culturally changes in terms of the doping culture, I should say, changes in Kenya so that we don't keep having these suspicions every time some major performance happens. We don't like that. Fun. All right. Well, we've talked to you about a lot of different things today.
A lot of things. Mm-hmm.
We are going to continue now with this 6th year of the AtoZrunning podcast, trying to bring to you the ideas around training, how to implement the thing we like to do as runners as well as possible. We're going to share with you some of the news, the latest and the greatest in our sport. And we're going to keep you up to date on some of the workings of our own immediate spheres as well. And hopefully you find that to be the right combination of interesting things and keep you going while you're on some run doing something right now.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.